Hey everyone, and welcome to March. Can you believe it's already March, 3 months into the year? That's a quarter of the year gone, basically. Well, not technically, because it will be the end of March, will be the first quarter, but I was never good at mathematics. Anyways, thanks. Welcome to Friday, Focus on Fridays. I am so excited to be chatting today with Jillian, who is actually our creative manager in for Mental Healthy Fit, who's been able to jump in and help us out for today. So how are you doing, Jillian?
I'm doing well, also not believing it's March.
Indeed, indeed. Well, at least the weather's changing. It's nice to have the brighter nights, the brighter nights. I was
Yes.
thinking last night because it was quite rainy here in Salt Lake, and it was nice to have that the darkness and the rain,
Hmm.
knowing that we're going towards the spring. I
Yeah.
always wonder, like when we're in November and we have that kind of dark, rainy night, it's like, oh, we're moving into the hard times. So it was
Yeah.
nice to know, hey, it's moving into the nice days. So,
Yeah, it hits
uh,
different.
yeah. So, so today we're going to watch one of our own films that we made a little while back, actually for World Mental Health Day, and it's called "Doing This Helps That." And it's just a bunch of people that live in Salt Lake that have lived experience with mental health and discussing their, what they do to help themselves, what they can do to help them to help that. So let's jump in right away and watch the film, and we'll be back afterwards to chat about it.
Storm clouds, that works so well.
Without this, I would be lost.
My life would be very bland.
I can't even fathom myself without this.
I would be dead by now or a religious nut of some sort, either joining a cult or trying to create my own cult.
Without this, I would be non-existent. But with this, I have meaning.
But with this, I am capable. With this, I feel connected.
With this, I am an example.
I'm Brian. I'm a transmedia storyteller. I have depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And I remember about 10 years ago, I got up on stage at a film festival and I announced myself. I said, "Hello, I'm Brian, and welcome to these films." And that was the first time that I ever felt a warmth from other people.
I have depression, anxiety, ADHD, and probably some undiagnosed PTSD.
I am diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, a mild form of OCD, and borderline personality disorder. The first time that I realized doing installation art and connecting with the community through marketing helped was when I realized that I was actually doing something that was much bigger than myself, that brought a lot of people joy. And putting things in that perspective was really helpful. Even though I feel this way about myself, or I wake up feeling a certain way about myself, something that I've done has left a stamp for other people to feel good about themselves.
When I was 15 years old, I had a drama teacher that was teaching improv at my high school, and I didn't have a great home life, and that was probably the first time I could apply my energy in an art form and not get a negative reaction.
I'm a creative designer and a comedic performer, and I have ADHD-induced anxiety and depression disorder, so that's fun.
Performing improv was wonderful, and I could do it at high school. When I tried doing it outside of high school, some of the hurdles that I ran into were gatekeepers, people that just thought I looked too young or didn't think I was very funny. Especially improv where you're performing from your worldview. I had a very dark, skewed worldview, and I wasn't necessarily in the right setting to express my honest feelings on stage without it being met with like a groan or pity from the audience. They were there to see comedy. So that was definitely a hurdle of how do I deal with a lot of this immense emotion that's heavy and not always so funny. on a comedy stage.
First time I realized this helped, I feel like I was very young, like a little kid, and just playing the piano that was in my house I grew up in.
When I was a kid, I had crippling anxiety because my parents moved around a lot. But my dad had this camera, and I filmed these stupid short films with the local neighbor kids, and we became best friends, and that helped a lot with my anxiety and connecting with people.
I think that anxiety and depression have the same roots, so I would say that I probably have both, just whatever day it seems to manifest itself in that way. I've used movement as something that helps me since I was a preteen. I went running like as fast as I possibly could. Anytime I get like a surge of anger or whatever teens go through, all of that like ups and downs, I'd just go running barefoot like down the street and then come back and huff and puff and kind of collapse and feel better.
I do gardening, I play music, I'm a candidate for the Green Party for Salt Lake County Mayor, a community organizer, air quality activist, and I have bipolar I disorder.
I am a poet and a spoken word performer. I'm also a teacher, and I have a history of alcoholism and disordered eating.
I use cooking to deal with my OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Cooking was a way to get out of my head. When you're cooking, you have to use your senses to pay attention to what's going on in the pot or on the cutting board or in the oven or whatever. You're always smelling, listening, tasting as you go.
Is something I can do 5 minutes at a time if that's all the amount of time that I have to do it. But not being able to leave the house, sometimes that's the only movement I get during the day.
I have bipolar disorder type 2 and some ADD and a little bit of PTSD, but that hasn't been a problem for a couple years.
Clowning found me by accident. I actually got divorced, and right around that time, burlesque and clowning both came in at the same time. So I didn't really choose it. This was something I was called to, something that I could do really well, and something that not only helped me, but helped my audiences and helped me deal with my life falling apart, really, and figure out where to go after everything kind of dismantled itself.
Shortly after my first breakdown with psychosis from bipolar I ran into the idea of regenerative or earth healing gardening and farming. Ever since then, gardening, and not just for myself, but advocating for it, organizing around it, supporting local farmers with it, experiencing it with my community beside me, has been intimately tied to my health and well-being.
It's tough, like for a lot of musicians, you know, sometimes they feel like the whole thing is to connect with people and communicate to people through your music, and I think it's really hard sometimes to feel comfortable in your own skin and be able to feel like yourself and just put yourself out there in front of people, because you like sometimes get a lot of judgment and hate from certain people from playing your music and expressing yourself. So I think it's really important to be able to overcome those things and just express yourself anyway and be yourself.
One time my dad laughed and said, "Oh, that was a good one." And then he said, "I love you and I'm proud of you." And I thought that was kind of cool because he's very hard to impress.
I do this show every year called An October Evening. It's a punk rock Halloween show. And this kid had a credit card with one of our marketing materials on his credit card. And before I could even say anything, he said, "Man, I'm just a huge fan." And I just smiled and I said, "That's the best compliment I've ever had in my life." And that was that. And honestly, if I heard somebody else say that story, I would say that they were a liar.
The nicest thing that anyone has ever said about my things, I can't find one, but I would say, I'll get choked up on this one, but anybody that has ever said that what I have done has like somehow touched their lives or changed their understanding of themselves or allowed themselves to get more in touch with themselves or proud of themselves. Any of that makes my life worth living.
I'm Brian, and doing this helps that.
Doing this helps that.
Doing this helps that.
So yeah, so we made this film, a couple of years ago, as I say, for World Mental Health Day, and it was really just to draw back the curtain and let people see that it's okay to ask for help and it's okay to have different outlets, because of course with mental health, it's very much traditional forms of treatment, go to the treatment center, go to therapy, take medication and things like that. But there's a lot more holistic approaches, as far as nutrition, exercise, meditation, stuff like that. But then on our side, we've got the creative outlets. So it was really cool to be able to chat with all these different people to see the width and breadth of what everybody else, implements in their lives. So, and I know that you kind of go along those same lines. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick introduction about maybe, your own experience with mental health and what you have sort of traversed in your life, in your journey, and what you've found that can help yourself.
Yeah, so I have atypical depression, anxiety, and a mild form of OCD. And from a young age, I started performing, doing like choral groups and dance and theater. And then eventually, when I was a teenager, theater became my overarching creative passion. And I pursued it professionally for a few years in my adult life until I realized that for me personally, pursuing it professionally kind of ruined it. So it had to be just a thing I did for love. But I actually hit a rough patch with it a few years ago, and I had to take about a 5-year break. And that was actually really tough because it took away that outlet that I had previously had. And it's taken just until the last year and a half when I found my way back to it, and found it again in that way of it being a really helpful creative outlet, and kind of took all the pressure off of it to be anything else. And it's been wonderful to come back to it, because in that 4 or 5 year break, I struggled to find a different outlet, and just how immensely helpful it is to have a creative place and a creative way to express yourself to help work through some of your own struggles is just so beneficial. Yeah, so my this is performance.
So when you were in the 5 years, downtime, did you genuinely notice a difference within your mental health? And was there a connection? Were you able to put and say, well, how come maybe it's because I'm not performing and expressing myself? Maybe that's the reason.
Actually, it's interesting. I had hit a point with performing where it had become kind of toxic, actually. Like it's like I say, it had kind of taken on all of the wrong attributes because I had personally put all of this pressure on it to be something else. And so I needed that break from it to really be able to go down to the bare bones and say, okay, is this something that I need in my life or that makes my life better? And I saw what my life was without it. And there was a very distinct difference of what my life was like without it. And I struggled to ever find an outlet that fit it the same way, that really fulfilled that need. And so, I really tried a whole bunch of different things and tried to find new hobbies and whatnot, but nothing ever filled that hole. And so when I've been able to come back to it, it's been with a lot of anxiety, and it was something that I really had to work through, but I knew was eventually going to be worth it. And I'm back to a really healthy place with it now. And I think because I took that break that was very much needed for my mental health, I've now been able to come back to it in a place that's really beneficial for my mental health and makes me really happy again.
Totally. And I've seen you in multiple productions, and you're always wonderful. You really do disappear into the characters. And I was wondering, are there any characters that you have played that you've kind of done it therapeutically, like to explore their character aspects, but also to explore your own? It was interesting. I was watching a documentary at Sundance about deaf performers, um, and they were discussing about the differences between method actors and how deaf performers can act, because there's a kind of there can be a disconnect as far as methodology, and they did raise a point like that method acting is really only a male centric piece. And I'd never thought about that the main method, you never hear about a woman method actor.
Sure.
You know, and I think that's a really interesting piece to explore, because again, men are terrible, you know, and men are just so, and you just think about all the method actors that they have to go, like I'm not a method actor at all, like I can turn it on, turn it off, whether I'm good or
Yeah.
not, but I don't feel the need to say, well, I need to go be a postman for 6 months so I can really know what it's like to be a postman and create this ego out of it. But
Yeah.
I'd never thought about it that I couldn't even name one female method actor.
Yeah, yeah. I've also never thought about that until right now.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I think that there's a big difference between research and being a method actor as we think of it. And I do feel like a lot of people use that method acting as an excuse to be kind of a bad person. Like, I think the reason that so much of that method acting comes up in public discussion as it does is because you hear about people having used it as an excuse to treat people really poorly or play really bad jokes, and they're like, oh, but it's all for the method, so it's fine. And it's like, oh, that's really not fine. But I do think research can be really beneficial. And to answer your first question about if there's a character that I feel like I was really able to use to explore myself, I'd say it's one of the most recent characters that I did. So I did a stage adaptation of Shakespeare in Love, the movie people might be familiar with, the controversial Oscar winner for Best Picture from the 90s, Gwyneth Paltrow. So I played the Gwyneth Paltrow role of Viola / Thomas Kent. And it was a really great opportunity for me to explore a lot of things that I'd been dealing with, such as performance anxiety and needing to find something outside of yourself. And for me, it even had themes of gender identity and other more nuanced things like that aren't necessarily scripted but are very subtextual. And yeah, I think for me that proved to be a very therapeutic process. And going into that show, I still was dealing with a significant amount of performance anxiety, but just being like, okay, if we just keep working through this, like it'll get better. And I think with all the things that I was able to really process and work on throughout that show, in the 2 shows I've done since that one, I haven't dealt with the performance anxiety. Like, I don't feel like I've been cured per se, but I do feel like I've hit a point of newfound comfort with performance that I'd really been lacking for a long time, and found myself settled into it again. And that was really due to that role and that process and being able to relate those things to myself.
Cool. Great stuff. And, you know, of course, it's difficult. Like I always say, like we can cheat our way to mental health, because in the end, our brains are just a tool. Our bodies are a tool for us to move and live with. And never have I said to myself, hey, I want to lift my right arm. Does my brain just decide to lift my left arm? You know, I can control my brain and I can control what I want to do. So you would think in the real world that when you're depressed, when you're down, you should be able to tell your brain, hey, release the serotonin, like Zeus, release the serotonin.
Yeah.
And then, but it's not the way it works. So we have to find ways to kind of con our brains into
Mm-hmm.
releasing serotonin when we want it. Of course, when we're in crisis, it's going to be very difficult. So,
Yeah.
and the whole aspect of, hey, listen to a happy song or, do something joyful and it'll get you going. But of course, when you're in crisis, that's the last thing you want to do. You just want to
Yeah.
sit in it. You want to drone in it. But again, with performance, I myself as well, like I put myself in positions that someone's going to call my name, and I have to get on stage. And no
Mm-hmm.
matter what I'm feeling, if I'm down and out, whatever, or I don't have a choice. I've
Yeah.
got to get on stage, or there's going to be an empty spotlight. Um, and of course, it can be very difficult with not just performance anxiety, but with natural anxiety, with depression,
Mm-hmm.
the weight of the world through the day. But again, it's incredible the therapeutic nature of just getting on, like you have to do it, and then it
Yeah.
becomes, muscle memory, and you're just getting going. And then when I'm off stage, when I do the performance and I'm off, things just seem better,
Yeah.
and it's just that process of like, hey, I got to take the step forward. I got to do this. And I suppose putting yourself in positions where people are going to call your name and you've got to start talking, and you got to do it
Yeah.
when people are relying on you is a nice metaphor for life, by having that support group around you
Yeah.
to want to communicate, to want to help. So any thoughts on that ramble?
Yeah. I think it's similar to what I'm told people find through working out, where it's like you have to just push past those first couple minutes and then it's all great. I think that's a myth, but I am told it's real. So I think it's very similar to that, where it's like you have to push past the discomfort and then find yourself settling into a place of feeling useful. I think so much of human nature has to do with us feeling purposeful. And
Mhm.
it's like you're saying, if you leave an empty hole, you're not fulfilling your purpose. And whether or not you're anxious or feeling other sorts of feelings about life in that moment, there is something that you get out of filling that hole. And it's for yourself and it's for other people. And it it like raises the collective spirit, I think. And that's not to say that it isn't hard. I mean, if you a performance anxiety I am still working through, that I still have not recovered from, is singing. Like if you put a spotlight on me and said, here's a microphone, go sing a song, it's your turn, go right now, I would fully start crying and probably run out of the room. But I also recognize that that's something that I just need to work through. And that once I work through it, and it'll probably take a while, but once I work through it, it will be okay. And it will once again be something that will make me feel good and hopefully make other people feel good and serve that purpose.
Cool. Perfect. Perfect. And you know, again, with performance anxiety, people have worries of um, uh, public speaking, all of these elements that they feel,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't have a creative bone in my body. But of course you do. Everybody can pick up a paintbrush and just,
Yeah.
slap it around, or people can write a poem. Even like I like to say, hey, just write a one sentence biography, and give yourself a happy ending. You can always be creative and always, find a way to make things better to help people. And I just think
Absolutely.
it's wonderful to be able to connect like this, and especially from your performance element, the the connection with the audience. Because all these people are just trying to get away from their troubles by coming to see
Yeah.
you, and it's incredible how that transference of energy and really can leave people in a much better place than when they walked in. So,
Yeah.
so but thanks for your insights. Really cool chit chat, and I'm very thankful for you to be on Focus on Friday. So I hope everything is great in your life, and you have a great weekend. So thanks
Good.
everyone for watching, and we'll see you next month.